All right. Hello, everybody. So 6.2, here we go. And 6.2 is going to be looking at our blood system. And so that's going to be about the heart and about the blood vessels carrying blood around our bodies. And so we need to be able to describe the types of blood vessels that are transporting our blood and how our heart is circulating blood. So first we need to consider arteries, veins, and capillaries. And this is a diagram here of an artery. And so you'll notice that the artery has a really thick outer wall on the outside right here. And then it also has a big thick pink layer here. This is the muscle, and it has a pretty narrow inside. The inside of tubes in your body is called the lumen. That's true for your digestive system too. So the inside of your small intestine is called the lumen. The inside of your arteries is called the lumen. So the purpose of this, having these thick walls in the narrow lumen, is so that when blood is pumping from your arteries, through your arteries, from your heart to your body, it's not going to rip apart because it's under high blood pressure. You want to maintain that blood pressure. And if it didn't have that elasticity, your heart would pump, it would rush out of the blood, out of the heart into the arteries, and then they just shred apart, and that wouldn't serve any purpose whatsoever because you'd just die. So veins have much narrower, thinner muscles, but they have a much larger lumen, and so veins are going to carry blood from your body back to your heart. And so actually the question you might be asking yourself is, well, once my blood is in my feet, how does it get back up to my heart? Because I don't have to stand on my head to make that happen. And you've probably noticed this maybe, or your grandma has mentioned this, when she flies, she experiences some swelling in her legs and feet. And so that's actually can cause problems because it can cause blood clots to form, and it can cause strokes. And so older people tend to wear special socks, compression socks, when they are flying so that the blood doesn't pool in their feet. So what's causing that blood pooling to happen? Well, they're not walking around. And so when you are getting blood back up to your heart, your veins need to be compacted by your muscles. And so as your muscles contract, it squeezes the blood back up, but obviously gravity would pull it back down. And so inside veins are backflow valves. So there's little flaps of tissue in here. Once the blood goes up, they close, and then it can't go back down. And then the last blood vessel we need to know about is the capillary. It has a very tiny lumen, and its outer wall is only 1 cell thick. So capillaries are designed to allow for the exchange of materials. So that might be glucose, that might be carbon dioxide or oxygen. And they are very important for your tissues to get the nutrients that they need. So this here is a summary of what I was talking about arteries, and they're going to carry blood away from your heart. Arteries start with an A, away starts with an A. This is how you can remember that. Veins are going to carry blood back to the heart, and capillaries are going to facilitate exchange of materials. Atherosclerosis is something where slowly over time plaque builds up in your heart, and plaque here isn't like the same kind of plaque as on your teeth, though it kind of looks the same. So plaque on your teeth is like yellow goop that forms over time, and it's the same kind of thing that can form inside your blood vessels. And when those things form, then it can lead to a heart attack. So it causes a narrowing of the artery, blood can't get through, and then it can't carry oxygen to your different organs, like your heart, for example, which is what leads to a heart attack. Additionally, parts of it can break off and then form a clot, and then that can cause a stroke where a blood clot goes to your brain, and then you don't get enough oxygen to a certain part of your brain. All right, and so then the other thing here is that yep, that's just everything about capillaries. Okay, next slide. So in your heart, we have a lot of parts that we need to remember. There are 4 arteries and veins we need to remember, and then there are 4 chambers that we need to remember. And so these chambers up top here, these are called our atrium, and they're going to pump blood down into the bottom part of the heart, the big muscular part. These are called ventricles. The ventricles are the big muscular parts, and they're going to pump out to either the lungs or the body. And this muscle here, you'll see, is quite a bit larger than this muscle on this side. And that's because this side of the heart is pumping to the body, and this side of the heart is pumping to the lungs. And we don't want our blood being pumped to the lungs, which is obviously much closer to our heart than, let's say, our brain is. So this has to pump further, so the artery here that the blood's going out of it's going to have tons of pressure when that blood shoots out of it. This one, we don't want to blast blood into our lungs, and it's much closer to pump to. So it just doesn't need as muscular of a tissue. So anything going to or from the lungs has the word pulmonary on it because that means lungs. So we are going to pump out of the right ventricle, and it goes out through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. The reason this color is blue here is because this has not as much oxygen. It's oxygen poor blood. So it's going to the lungs to pick up oxygen. So it's returned from the body. When it's in the body, it drops off oxygen, and now it's oxygen poor. It needs to get more oxygen. So it's going to go to the lungs, pick up oxygen, and then it's going to come back into this top left atrium. So you can see these these arteries, these veins, returning blood from the body to the heart. And they're going to go into the left atrium, pulmonary veins from the lungs to the heart. And that's oxygenated. And then it's going to pump out through this artery here is called the aorta, and that'll go out to the body. And when the blood is coming back from the body, it comes in to this right atrium through the superior vena cava. And through the vena cava. You only need to memorize the vena cava. So it comes in from the body, vena cava, right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary artery to the lungs, back from the lungs, pulmonary vein, left atrium, left ventricle, aorta out to the body. And so you might have noticed here when you're looking at this is the left side and that's the right side. So what's going on there? Well, we're looking at the front side of the heart. And so what they have done is they've flipped it. So if it were in your body, it would actually be turned around. So you'd be looking at it like that. And this would be your left side and that would be your right side. And so you're looking like a mirror replication of the front side of your heart there, which is why the sides are backwards. Okay, so the atrium are receiving blood, pumping it down. Ventricles are muscular parts that are going to pump to the body or the lungs. Pulmonary artery or vein to or from the lungs, and aorta is to the body. Vena cava is blood back from the body. All right, so circulation, when we are getting our heart to pump or beat, you're probably thinking, what makes that happen? Well, there is something called a sinus node, and it is in our right atrium. It's sometimes referred to as the sinoatrial node because it's in the atrium. And it sends an electrical signal that sends a signal all across the atrium, and it says contract now. And then they contract, pump blood down into the ventricles. And then there's actually a second node, which you'll learn about if we do option D, the atrioventricular node. So first node signals electrical, second node signals electrical, and the second node, the atrioventricular node, sends a signal to the ventricles to contract. And the SA node contracts first, signal, and then the AV node contracts second. And there's like a slight delay because otherwise you'd have blood pumping in all different directions, and that wouldn't make any sense because you wouldn't get blood out to your body properly. So that is how circulation happens in your heart. And we have a double circulation system in our bodies, as do all mammals. And that means that in order for a full circuit of blood to go through our bodies, we have to pass through the heart twice. And so what that means is it has to come from the lungs with the oxygen, go out to the body, come back from the body, go back to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and go back to the heart. So in doing that, it goes through 2 times. And our heart is separated by a muscle wall that the mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood does not happen. Let me close my head here, so if I can. It seems like this head is really big for some reason right now. Okay. And then your body knows that it needs to increase your heart rate because it has detectors. There's one in your aorta here, and they're chemical detectors that are measuring your blood pH. When your blood becomes high in carbon dioxide, like ocean acidification, it becomes slightly acidic. And so the pH will drop, and that will send a signal via nerves to your brain that will say your heart needs to beat more. Obviously, this is not conscious, but your body can also produce something like epinephrine, which you've probably heard of as adrenaline. And these are created by the adrenal glands, which are on top of your kidneys. And that happens when you have a fright, for example, or you're stressed out. And so that'll also make your heart beat more. All right. So then last slide here before the summary is going to be about the cardiac cycle. And so this graph here is a little bit intimidating, but essentially it's just saying like what's happening with the pressure in your body and what's happening with the volume in your heart and the volume of blood in your heart. And so what's going to be happening, this aligns with an ECG, which is an electrocardiogram. And this is measuring, you've probably seen these on hospital shows, but this is measuring your heartbeat. And so these first bumps here, like this P wave up there, that is going to be where your atrium contract. So your atrium contract and the blood comes down. And then the valves close here. And then your ventricles are going to contract. And the ventricles are going to cause a high spike in pressure because the blood's getting shot out of your ventricles. And you'll notice here that the volume of blood in the heart drops significantly. And so then once the blood is out of the ventricles, then the valves reopen and everything starts filling back up again. And you can see that blood filling back up again here. And at this point here, this T wave is where the valves open again. And so flowing back into the heart can start, ventricular filling can restart. And so all of this actually takes about 1 second. I think it's 1.4 seconds for this whole thing to happen. But essentially, what you need to memorize is that the pressure in your heart is going to be highest when your ventricles are contracting, and the volume of blood in your heart is going to be lowest when your ventricles are contracting. Okay, so to summarize, arteries are thick-walled to withstand high pressure, while veins are thin-walled with low pressure. So this is a micrograph of an artery, and that there is a vein. Blood circulates through the heart 2 times to move through the whole body. And the SA node triggers the heartbeat. That's the sinoatrial node. And then the atrioventricular node triggers the contraction of the ventricles. And then chemoreceptors detect pH changes and send signals to the brain via nerves to change your heart rate. All right. And lastly, blood pressure and volume in heart are going to change through different stages of heart contraction. All right, let's see if I can get this to turn off now. I don't know how to do this.